And hi, everybody. Welcome to Political Roundtable. Doug Miles along with Gary Schuster as we come to you on the day after the primary elections in several states around the United States, particularly here where we are in Florida, also in Arizona, and a couple other states as well. Some interesting results. We'll go over that as well. And we'll also see how it impacts the midterm elections, which are coming up this November. So the midterms are already upon us. Gary, just seems like you and I were watching Donald Trump here at the Van Wezel about 2 years ago when he made his, he didn't really make it official at that time, but everybody kind of knew he was going to do it, but he made one of his early speeches before he announced he was going to run for president.
Yeah, he went farther than we thought at the time, didn't he? He, cashed in on all the turmoil that was going on around the country, and the Democratic candidate, of course, people didn't show up for that election for her, and lo and behold, about 1 o'clock in the morning, he ends up the president of the country.
Yeah, it was a full house at Van Wezel, and we got a kind of a taste of what he's been doing lately, particularly before these primary elections, and I'm sure he'll do it before the midterms. The rallies he does, very impressive. Whether you like him or not, he's very impressive when he handles these crowds. It seems like he's almost ad-libbing the whole speech.
Well, I think he is actually. And the crowds are his crowds. I mean, they're his kind of people, and they've stayed with him through all the last 2 years. Maybe even a little stronger than they were when they started, backing him way back when.
Yeah, well, we'll get into that a little bit. Let's start with in our neck of the woods, Gary, with the Florida primaries. And as you and I talked before we went on a little bit earlier today, where mailboxes have been stuffed with all sorts of flyers and postcards of the last several weeks, because you can vote early down here, so they really get an early start on trying to get you to vote for them. But we had a couple of interesting elections, particularly for Florida governor and Florida Senate.
Well, we did, and that early voting actually turned out to be about 1.5 million votes, I'm told. A lot of people participated in the mail and then the early voting as well. So they sort of had a feel, for who they wanted and when they wanted to get that vote in. So, of course, a couple things happened for the governor's race. Scott can't run because he's term limited, so he's running for the Senate seat against
Bill Nelson.
And so Nelson was unopposed, of course, but Scott won his sort of primary, 80 or 90% to 10. But those guys are going to face off in the fall. It's supposed to be the most expensive Senate race that's ever been held down here, and that's that. But for the governor's race, it's going to be interesting because you have the Congressman Ron DeSantis facing the current mayor, and will be the former mayor, I guess, of Tallahassee, Florida, state capital, who is a black man who's run for African American job up there for the city, and came from behind. He was running against in that primary against Wendy Graham, who is the daughter of the former senator and governor of Florida. Everybody thought she was going to win. They thought she was the favorite, and spent a lot more money than this fellow did. And lo and behold, he comes out of the pack of 4 or 5 people and wins the race.
That race, we'll talk about Andrew Gillum in a minute, but on the Republican side, that got some national press, even earlier today as we talked tonight on the show. But Ron DeSantis was way behind Adam Putnam. He was a former congressman here in Florida, left that to become the agriculture commissioner of the state of Florida. But right. Donald Trump came and did a rally for him up in Tampa. I'm talking about DeSantis. He was behind leading into that rally and turned it around. He won by 20 points.
Yeah, he made the appearance and then made a tweet that DeSantis was his guy, and the thing switched upside down from Putnam to DeSantis, and DeSantis ran away with it last night by 20 percentage points. They said that the biggest turnout for him came out of Broward County. Picked up 40,000 votes in Broward County because that's where he was. I guess he's the congressman from down in that area, right, someplace close, and just ran away with it down there. That's where he got That's where they made up the difference.
Yeah, I was a little surprised, too, leading into that rally where, Donald Trump went and promoted DeSantis, but I always thought leading into that, Adam Putnam was almost a shoo-in. I think he thought so, too. He kind of put his national career on hold after he was a congressman. He left kind of suddenly when he decided to, leave the Congress. Wasn't he a guy that people thought might, eventually run for president or at least senator at that point, and then maybe president? He had that kind of political career on the rise, and then he kind of said, no, I'm going back to Florida for a while.
Exactly, and I think he saw an opening down here. I think he sort of read the tea leaves and could see it. He knew that Scott was term limited, and thought there was an opportunity, and never thought about DeSantis as an opponent, another congressman, but thought that he was sort of golden, and thought that he could run away with it, and had a lot of backing. Had a lot of people who were telling him, "Why don't you run? And we'll be behind you," and all that. And so he did it, and initially, it looked good. It looked just like he had planned, until Trump showed up and made the tweet and made some ads, and DeSantis featured Trump in all of his ads, and the name or the picture or the White House or something that was Trump-like, and the Trump faithful ate it up.
Yeah, DeSantis today, I don't know if you saw, Gary, apparently I didn't see it, I just read about it since we talked earlier. I guess he was on some show being interviewed and made a comment. Now, I read the comment, and there was nothing racist in it, but how some of the media is hammering him for saying a certain word about his opponent, and less than 24 hours after he wins, he's already getting slammed.
Well, it doesn't take long in this 24-hour news cycle thing to, become instant, right? It's just by the second that this stuff goes. I mean, you can see it's just amazing how it travels, right? I mean, what a presidential tweet does,
sure,
right?
Sure. And you covered politics. I mean, again, Gary Schuster for CBS News and Detroit News, going back to the Carter and Reagan administrations. Have you ever seen in the last, 3 years, really Trump leading into his election and all that, how bad it's gotten media-wise? I mean, not everybody in the media is terrible, but boy, it's tough to find somebody out there that's follows journalism rules 101.
Yeah, except for the big papers, you don't see it much. You see a lot of lots of blogs, loads of blogs from everybody. You see tweets, you see Facebooks, you see. I mean, I look at the bylines on some of these things that are written and are online, and they're just you just sit in your house and you can make it up, And so it really is. It's amazing what's there and how it comes in all the time. You know how your phones sort of blow up, right? I mean, it's all kinds of stuff, and that's exactly what's happened with the coverage. I mean, I watch the press conferences from the White House, the midday conferences. I don't know anybody in there. They don't even identify the people who's, used to be there.
You used to have to say your name, or name in the paper or the organization.
They put
right?
your name or your paper, the broadcast thing or something like that. They don't even know anymore because it changes by the minute,
yeah.
It must be, to be the press secretary, it must be incredible to be able to just sort of know that whoever's coming in there has credentials, how they get them, what the requirements are for credentials. It used to be tough to get credentials to be a White House correspondent and be credited to go into the place. It doesn't look like it is anymore. Maybe it is, but I just can't. I can't fathom what it takes to be in there, because it seems like the place is always crowded and you don't know who anybody is.
And you were there in the heyday when Sam Donaldson and even Dan Rather, they would get a little heated with the president at the time, but it was never disrespectful like the guy from CNN, Costa, and some of these others. I've never seen it like that before. Just totally antagonistic.
Yeah, no, that's right. It was. I mean, it verged on it with Rather and Nixon. It did. They got a little antagonistic. What are you running from, Mr.
Right.
President?
He was a little snippy with the president. Right. Yeah.
Right. But other than that, you didn't see it. There was always respect, always some decorum about it. But the press conferences, I mean, Trump gets as good as he gives. You know what I mean? And he says something, they say something, and he either shuts the place down, doesn't talk, or turns his back to the camera. Or, I mean, it's just you just can't believe it if you watch it. If you watch the press conferences and those little brief mini things he has here and there, you can't believe it from the way it used to be.
No,
you know?
no. It's a shame.
And I don't.
And poor Sarah Sanders Huckabee. I don't know why anybody would want that job. I mean, you know, a lot of people that have done that press secretary job, but she's had the toughest of anybody. Has to have, right?
Absolutely. I mean, and her dad was a politician.
Sure,
you know?
Mike Huckabee. Yeah,
he was a governor and ran for president. He was one of the 16 people on the stage with Trump at one time. So she knows the business, but even she, I'm sure, can't sort of understand how this is what it is now with him. I mean, to be his spokesperson must be really tough.
I hope she gets
really tough.
Good money, or she will after she leaves that job. Well, she'll have a book out of it, so that'll help. I don't know how much they get paid, those press secretaries. Not a lot, I don't think, but yeah.
Well, they're my guess is she's someplace around 130 a year.
For what she has to put up with, not good.
It's not enough.
Not enough.
Yeah, it's not enough.
But yeah, she'll get a book and speaking engagements, so that'll make up for it.
I suppose. Yeah. I mean, most of them do, right?
Yeah.
But boy, I mean, that's a high price to pay to get a. You know what? That woman too has 4 children. I think she got a full-time mom,
right?
But there she is, and he's bombing around, going to here and going to there. So it's a tough job.
Yeah, she does a good job too. You know, if you're a Trump supporter, you like her. If you're not, you maybe think she's stonewalling, but she does a good job under the circumstances. So.
Yeah, but she gets a lot of. I've read some things that when she went down to the restaurant that closed. You know.
Oh, that restaurant in Virginia, right? Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, she got
totally uncalled for. Right.
Yeah, she got beat up about that. I mean, she was down there and they wouldn't serve her. And just that kind of stuff. Yeah, and I'm sure it's that way more than you know.
I never heard of that ever happen to any other politician. Or anybody in the office.
No, anybody.
Or staffer.
Anybody.
I've never heard that before.
I mean, I knew Jody Powell, Carter's press secretary, and Jimmy Baker, or Jim Brady, and
right.
Larry Speaks, and all those guys. It never happened to those guys. I mean, it was totally different world.
Yeah, just the nature of it. Well, let's get back to the governor election again. You mentioned Andrew Gillum, the mayor of Tallahassee here. Of course, Bernie Sanders put in an endorsement for him. I guess that helped that base to put him over the top. The socialist base, I guess, in Tallahassee helped, right?
Well, I guess so. I mean, it's an interesting situation because Gillum was a Hillary backer. Not really a Sanders backer.
Yeah.
And you know the animosity between Bernie and Hillary in a lot of cases, even though they were fellow senators, there was still a lot of animosity within the campaign. But now that Gillum's got the nomination for the Democratic Party for the job, he's now saying, "Well, I was really a Hillary fan." So he's trying to play both ends because the Bernie side, the progressive side, is too progressive for the moderate Democrats.
Right.
So Gillum doesn't want to lose them, and so he's faced with trying to make peace with both sides, which is, tough to do.
Yeah, especially now that people have seen, the way Donald Trump handles it. He takes a stand and goes with it. And people respect that, even if you don't maybe need to vote for him. I think a lot of people respect that. But now you go back to the old politician way of taking both sides of your mouth. That's not going to fly, particularly in Florida, because Florida's still that swing state. You got about half and half.
Swings. That's exactly right. And one of the things that they're already concerned about on the Democratic side, apparently, is that mid-year elections, there's not as much turnout. Although they said for the primary yesterday that there were a lot more young voters apparently turned up, and the turnout was better than it was 4 years ago in the mid-years, in 14, right? So there's some hope for that, but they said they got a lot of work to do to try and encourage these people to come out and vote.
What do you think in that race? DeSantis up by 5-10 right now, you think? Or what's the early call? And
yeah, I don't know.
Tough to call this state.
Right.
You really can't call it. It's tough. We've lived here a long time. You really can't predict it.
No, you really can't, because it's just too shaky with all the different fingers in the pie, right? I mean, you got Bernie and you got Trump and you got whatever the two candidates are going to do about getting their bases secured. Just one of those. It's one of those things that it's going to be very difficult, I think, to put a. I mean, the polls will be all over the place, I'm sure, like they are in a lot of cases,
Yeah, we'll do another few shows before then. We'll have a better idea, but right now it is up in the air. Let's get back to the Senate. We talked briefly. Governor Rick Scott, who again term limited, so he decided to run for Senate and won handily in his primary, but he goes against Bill Nelson, who's been in since 2000. Since it's a swing state, tough to pick that one there. Of course, Scott, I thought, did a great job here in Florida. He gets a lot of heat for maybe how he made his millions in the Medicare industry, whatever it was. But he turned the state around economically. So I don't know how popular he may be.
Yeah, I don't know. I was looking at the vote totals just for the primary, and he had brought in million and some, and was doing pretty well. And of course, Nelson didn't have an opponent, so it really wasn't a race.
Right.
You couldn't tell from that. The ads, Nelson didn't have a whole lot of advertising on that I could see.
I didn't see any.
Some I saw some about what he had done for the state and this and that, but Scott was everywhere. He had a lot of ads, and he's got one running now that says he was raised by a single mom, and she had to work 3 jobs to feed his brother, and they lived in a public housing situation, and the car was repossessed, and he really gives himself a poor mouth kind of appearance, and come up by the bootstraps. And he said, you come in a place like this, and you might find the next nurse or the next teacher. You might even find a governor.
Yeah.
So he's playing to that end, and it's not a bad ad. It's a long ad. It may be as much as a minute. I don't know, but I see it a lot. And I didn't see much from Nelson. So he and the Democratic campaign committee, the Senate Democratic campaign committee, is going to have to do some work.
And he wrote it against Nelson. I'm talking about the repeal of Obamacare, so that's going to get Scott some votes there. He can play that up big. Governor Scott can.
Right.
So
exactly.
But again, half and half state. You don't know how that's going to work. Congress race down here. Of course, we've had Vern Buchanan. He's been in there. I believe this is his 5th term he's running for, and he won his primary pretty easily. He goes against David Shapiro, a local businessman in our area, who beat Jan Schneider, who seems to run every 2 years, but she didn't get past it again.
Perennial candidate.
We've interviewed her. I think we interviewed her back on SRQ radio locally back in 2004 or whatever it was. So yeah,
we did. That's when she was still getting pretty good share of the vote. But this time,
not even close.
Shapiro won it. Yeah. Won it handily. Right. Exactly.
But this area has always had a Republican congressman, at least since I've lived here, going back to Dan Miller. He was in there a long time, and Catherine Harris was in there for a couple of terms. So it's pretty well locked in with the Republican seat. Be very tough for Shapiro to knock him out.
Yeah, the 16th district is difficult, I think, because it's like you say, it's been sort of cemented for the Republican Party for a long time. But those ads, Shapiro's ads are pretty tough on Buchanan. Buchanan's ads were tough on Shapiro.
Yeah.
He was advertising even before the primary, knowing that Shapiro was probably going to win, and was shooting at him then, taking cuts at him then.
Let's talk a little bit about the Arizona. They had some primary elections out there. Interesting, you told me before about Martha McSally. She wins out there, the primary, and they're, of course, replacing Senator Jeff Flake out there, right? Longtime senator.
That's right, and McSally is a former fighter pilot, Navy fighter pilot, and she was sort of anti-Trump for quite a while until she sort of saw what was going on, and she had a chance, and so she walked down the street from Capitol Hill, where she's a congresswoman, and met with Trump and saw him and talked to him, and was able to ride that Trump association to that victory. So she's got her work cut out for her, though, with the Democratic nominee. So that's you got that. Plus the governor, Republican governor, is going to. He lost a primary a couple of weeks ago down there, and is going to be replaced. He has to leave office, and but before he leaves, he has to appoint John McCain's successor.
Right.
So there's a list of people that will have to be thought about, including former Senator John Kyle in Arizona, and a couple others who are in the running to be selected by the governor to replace McCain for a short-term special election that would take them through 2020, November of 2020. And they're looking for a candidate who will then agree to run for the remainder of the 2-year remainder of McCain's term, which may be tough for somebody like Kyle, who retired. I don't know why he retired. I sort of forget what happened there, but they want to get somebody who's going to last and run again. And that's the same year, 2020. It's a presidential year, and Trump would, if he, decides he wants to do it again, to rerun. It'll make it an interesting session.
Yeah. Yeah, we'll wrap up with this. You mentioned John McCain, of course. Did you ever get a chance while you were in Washington covering to meet him or talk to him individually, or any thoughts on him?
Oh yes, I knew John. Sure, I knew him, and he was involved in a lot of issues, of course.
Sure.
He was chairman of the Foreign Relations Committee and Armed Services, I think, and several other things that he was involved in a lot of different things, and ran, of course, for President Sarah Palin. But I knew him, and I knew him back. I knew his first wife, Carol, who he was married to while he was prisoner of war.
That's right. Right.
She worked in the Reagan administration for a while, so I knew Carol McCain and John. So yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, obviously what he went through, nobody should have to do that, and honorable the way he could have gotten out. They would have let him out because his father was, of course, Admiral McCain.
Right.
But he said no. He stayed in there and really got beat up so bad he never really had full use of his arms or shoulders after he got home.
Right. Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
But
he's lying in the state capitol in Arizona tonight, and I think tomorrow comes up to Washington to lie in state in Rotunda in the Capitol there, and then the burial is Sunday out at the Naval Academy where he went to school, and he's going to be buried next to one of his old friends. I think he was actually at the prison camp with him.
Oh, is that right? I didn't hear where that. So it won't be at Arlington,
that's right.
but it'll be at the Naval Academy. Okay, great.
Yeah, it's over at the Naval Academy. Right.
Yeah, yeah. He had a colorful life, no doubt about it, and
absolutely
longtime senator, almost as long as a man he admired, even though they were on opposite ends of the parties. Ted Kennedy. He was became the lion of the Senate himself, right? He used to call Ted Kennedy that. So
and McCain died of the same cancer, brain cancer.
Same thing, yeah. Sad.
Yeah.
But anyway, we remember John McCain tonight. But that'll wrap it up for this edition of Political Roundtable. We'll do more as we get closer to the midterm elections. But again, it's heating up again. Seems like, again, we just had the presidential run. But politics never ends, right, Gary?
That's right.
For Gary Schuster, this is Doug Miles saying thanks for listening. We'll see you again next time.